Hi, I'm Missy with On William Street. Welcome back. This week we are going to talk about raw edge applique. So we're going to go through some tips and some tricks of what we do for our raw edge applique, and hopefully you'll be able to learn something new and make your projects go a little easier. The project that we're going to work on today is our Gone Fishing quilt. So we worked with Mr. Domestic's new line, Catch and Release by Art Gallery Fabrics. It is so much fun. It's got so much texture and the prints are perfect for this Gone Fishing quilt. So we're going to show you how easy it is. So this is one of our finished blocks. We actually have a 3 set of fishing kits, so with their different accessories, and girls and boys, because we all like to go out and do a little fishing. So we're going to show you how easy it is to put this block together, even with some of these small pieces. And it's a promise that everybody can do this. So what we use for our raw edge applique is we use Heat and Bond Feather Light. So these are 8.5 by 11 sheets that you can print the templates off in your printer. So it makes it really easy. You don't have to do all of that tracing. I know before I discovered the printable, I had to trace all of my templates onto the Heat and Bond, and it took a lot of time. So this just cuts down that time, and it's awesome. And we use the Feather Light instead of the Heat and Bond Light. So Heat and Bond Light is something that we used to use, but when we discovered the Feather Light, we switched over to it. It makes it so your fabric is not nearly as stiff with your applique pieces. So it kind of gives you a little more of that softness than the Heat and Bond Light did. So we're going to go ahead and show you how we're putting these together. So we have taken here, so this is all of our Heat and Bond Light templates, our Feather Light templates, and this is where you can kind of see where it's all been printed on. So we've cut that out, we've ironed it onto our fabric already, and then we've cut out each of those templates on the line. So when you're cutting it out to iron it onto your fabric, you don't need to cut it out on the line, just kind of cut out around it, iron it onto your fabric, and then you're going to cut directly on the lines for each of those templates. And this just makes the process go so much quicker. It is great, gets you to sewing faster, which is what we all want to do. So as you're doing this, make sure that you follow the instructions on the Heat and Bond Feather Light package. You do want to make sure that your iron is set at a medium setting and that you really keep it on for just a minimal amount of time. I like to put it on and literally just count to 5. So if you put it on for too long, then you can actually take some of that stickiness away, and you're going to lose that stickiness in your Feather Light. So we want to make sure that we've still got that stickiness available. And then we're just going to peel off the back of the paper. And then we're going to dress our little fisherman right here on our background piece. So get her all nice and ready to go. Sometimes if you need to, little tweezers or something can help get those edges if you're having trouble getting those edges to come up. Nails also work too, but I just cut all of mine off. And on this, we do have in our instructions kind of a layout of how you put each of your fishermen together, but don't worry about being exact on those. Those are really just guidelines for you. You can kind of bring in all the little personality for each of your fishermen when you're doing this, and I think having them all just a little bit slightly different and not exactly the same on each block just kind of brings that fun little personality, and you can, so don't worry about them being too exact. And another thing that you're going to want to keep in mind when you're using fabrics that are a little bit lighter, for instance this shirt, because it does have that white background underneath the print. If you have a skin that is darker than what we're using here, I would back that shirt in a white muslin or cotton and then put it onto the applique. That'll just get rid of any ghosting from the fabric below it, because you don't want to have that skin fabric showing through and having that ghosting in your finished quilt. So you can either do 2 layers of the feather light for that, or you can just, if the pieces are big enough, like with these shirts, I still just did one layer and then just kind of held it in place as I ironed it on for our darker skinned fishermen. Got our fishing pole. Now you'll notice that we don't have a fish on this one. We actually have our fish as a 3D item on our quilt. So they are going on after the quilt is completely finished. So there's no fish on our pole just yet. And then we'll hold this down and literally it's like put it on, count to 5, and move it over. Okay, now we are ready to go over to the machine and applique everything in place. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I use a blanket stitch when I do my raw edge applique. You don't have to do a blanket stitch, you can do a zigzag stitch. You can shorten your width or your length on that so that it is more like a satin stitch. You can also use any decorative stitch that your machine offers. Those can sometimes be fun to use as well. Or you can also just do a straight stitch and stitch close to that edge all the way around. I've seen a lot of people use that as well, but I do prefer the blanket stitch look, so that is what I go to. So I always do my needle down. I sew with my needle down when I'm doing applique because then it just makes it easy to pick it up and pivot around these areas. So it's just gonna ease that a little bit for you. And then also my machine has an option to change the speed to a half speed. So I also do that as well. And just helps me so that I don't get a little crazy, because I know sometimes we can just kind of be going along and we forget that we're getting a little too quick on our foot pedal. So I slow myself down a little bit with that. So I do a back stitch on my raw edge applique. I know some people do, they kind of bury their threads. That's actually a technique that I hadn't even thought of, and somebody brought it up a couple of weeks ago. So that is something that I might try going forward. But for now, I've always done a back stitch, so that's what we're going to continue to do. So we'll do a quick little back stitch. And we're just going to guide the needle around this little face. And just go slow. That is the biggest thing with applique. If you're new to applique and you're a little bit worried or the pieces are smaller, just slow it down. Don't worry about rushing through the project. Keep that slow and steady. Now we're going to pivot around that neck. I'm going to do another back stitch here. And then we'll bring it down to this arm. Pull our thread out a little bit. So we've got some slack. And I don't really cut the threads in between each of these pieces as I go. It helps really keep the threads from getting all meshed up underneath of your applique block. So I do all of the cutting after I'm finished with the block. Okay, and then as we are getting closer to the smaller pieces of this hand, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to shorten your stitch length just a little bit and your stitch width. Just bring those down a little bit so that they're not going to overlap onto that fishing pole. And then you'll be able to go right up next to the fishing pole. And this little hand does have an extra little piece that goes onto it over the top of that fishing pole, but you don't want to applique that on just yet. You want to make sure you get that pole in place before you add that piece. Okay, and then we will go ahead and just finish going around all of these little pieces, and we'll show you what the project looks like when we're complete. So now we have our block finished and it's all ready to go into our quilt. Hopefully you've learned some tips and tricks that will make your raw edge applique a little bit easier, and you won't be scared of those little pieces. I promise you can do it. Just remember to go slow. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave a comment, or else you can also send us an email. Make sure you follow us on YouTube so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos, and you can get your own Gone Fishing quilt pattern on our website. And please post and tag us as you're working on your project. We would love to see what you're doing, and we can help you through the process if you have any questions as you go. And you can follow us on Instagram and Facebook to see everything that we're working on. We'll see you next week. Bye.